it was also tough, like, because you're writing sometimes about people who are, either dead or you haven't talked to in forever, or, might get upset at you for it. Um, at one point I even, because my dad is in this a lot, as you know, I sent him a near final draft, and I was like, I'm not looking for notes, but I just wanted you to see this so you don't feel blindsided by it. And then he came back with notes.
Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. I'm Jeremy, and unfortunately, Alan is not able to join us today, but we still want to welcome you back to GG Everybody, your ultimate pop culture podcast where we hit start on all things geek. From video games and comic books to tabletop RPGs, tech trends, and beyond, we're here to level up your fandom. Whether you're a console warrior, a dungeon master, or just someone who loves diving deep into geek culture, we've got something for you. Each episode, we tackle the biggest topics, hot takes, and hidden gems across your favorite fandoms. So grab your dice, charge your controllers, and get ready to geek out, especially in light of our guest today. Today, we're honored to welcome an Emmy-nominated writer whose work spans television, video games, and journalism. You've likely seen his writing on the Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon, did work on as an intern at SNL, Full Frontal with Samantha Bee, Bill Nye Saves the World, worked for Nintendo, he's worked for IGN, and his book, Good Game No Rematch, is due to come out on April 1st. It's a collection of essays that blend humor and heartfelt reflection on the joys and challenges of growing up with video games. And we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about that whole process. So, ladies, gentlemen, NBs, Mike Drucker, welcome to GG Everybody, Mike.
Hello, everybody. This is, when you hear my voice, this is the voice that you're hearing.
So, Mike, welcome. First of all, how long have you been working on this book? Like, it seems like the finish line is here. I've seen posts on social media of you sharing your book and stacks, getting your review copies and everything. Like, how long has this process been for you?
This process has probably been about a year and a half. I started writing the pitch during the writers' strike, the Writers Guild of America strike back in 2023. And, because we weren't like really allowed to pitch shows, we weren't allowed to pitch movies, you really weren't even supposed to be like, doing any project in that direction. And so I was like,
Right.
well, I'm allowed to write a book. And so I started to think of things that I might want to pitch as a book. And I talked to my agent, who referred me to a book agent at the same agency. And I sent him like 5 or 6 different ideas. And the one he really landed on was this one, a series of like funny essays about my life in video games. So, and then wrote up a giant pitch document that was like 70 pages long itself. And luckily we got it from HarperCollins.
That's amazing. What were some of the other pitches that kind of fell by the wayside? What may have been?
Oh God, I barely even remember them at this point. I think one was like a similar book, but about Christmas. I think was one of the pitches. There was a novel about there was a novel that was basically a script I'd already written that I was like, hey, what if I turned this into a novel? And he was like, it's honestly a better script. And I can't remember the rest, but they weren't. Honestly, this was probably the right idea.
Yeah. Obviously, it made it, and I have to say, if you haven't had a chance yet, definitely check out my review of the book on the Geekly Grind. Superb. It's honestly, Mike, it's a really, really freaking good book. So
thank you very much. I appreciate that.
And I know I said frickin', but you're allowed to swear as well. So just in case the spirit moves you.
Right. Of course.
We have adults here. But yeah, amazing book.
Thank you.
I guess, I'm curious, was there, I know you mentioned you kind of pitched it about a year and a half ago and it's kind of been in that process, but obviously your whole life has been, right, leading up to this book, all these various stories are kind of pulling into it. But when you were thinking about this pitch, were there other books that you were looking to as sort of like it would be interesting to kind of like spin off of that, or like, I guess what made you put that on the list of the various pitches? Was it I'm curious about that.
A couple of years ago, Patton Oswalt had a book called Silver Screen Fiend, and reading it was sort of like kind of similar. There's differences, but like, he's talking about his life and how much his love of movies has affected his life and how, movies have influenced him. And, I've also seen like there's a lot of music memoir type things that do that, where people talk about their life through music. And I kind of realized there hasn't been a lot of that in games. We have nostalgic conversations about games all the time, but we don't really have a book that just about that. We might have it about like nostalgic culture, like here's photos of old video games, but we don't have like sort of I don't know, a very personal take on it. And
Hmm.
so I don't know, I really wanted to do that. I mean, I have loved games my whole life, and so it was a chance to, I don't know, a chance to sort of like sum that all up in a weird way.
Yeah, no, I definitely pulled that out. I think there is definitely a tendency to, pull back the old Toys R Us ads right around
Yeah,
Christmas time, be like, oh, remember when you could get the N64 for $65? Like you'll see it circulate on all social media and stuff.
yeah,
But what I really love about Good Game No Rematch was that it does kind of make you recontextualize those memories in
yeah,
where your life was at that point, right? And so, uh, you and I are kind of contemporaries in the sense that like you were born 84, I was born 85.
right,
So a lot of the beats that you had, I was kind of like, yep, I was right there with you. Like
yeah,
I was about 2, you were 3, playing Mario.
yeah,
All these different kind of touch points. Uh, Really helped it to resonate with me, and I think it'll resonate with millennials in particular. I think because of that, or
yeah.
elder millennials as they call us now. Um, but
Yeah, they do.
but I think also, I mean, it's not just for that audience. I want to be very clear about that as
Yeah,
well. I think that the younger audience can definitely find a lot of parallels as well. And I guess my next question would be like, were you concerned that it might land too solidly in like my experience and people around my age, or like, or do you feel that, again, like these experiences are pretty universal and or did you kind of throw things in there, quote, for the kids, end quote, to try and like get those stories in there?
well, I
Like
definitely, I
Fortnite,
definitely,
Roblox, whatever.
I didn't throw anything in there for the kids. I can say
Yeah.
that. But I did like just try to focus on things that really interested me and really
Yeah.
connected to moments of my life. Like there are games that are like some of my favorite games of all time that I don't talk about just because they're not linked to something interesting that happened to me. There's no
Mhm.
way to, draw a parallel between the two. So, well, the main consideration when I was picking games to write about was like, does this actually affect me in some way?
Mm.
Was this important to the moment somehow? And or in the case of Dungeons and Dragons, just talked about tabletop RPGs.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
so I do, but yes, when I was writing it, I was like, is this just going to appeal to people who had similar video game experiences as me? But I would argue that it's a wider range that we think. This includes a lot of Gen X and like a lot of Gen Z know about these games. They've played these
Yeah.
games. Um, and since it's about the experience connected to the game, it's more about like how that game affected me and my reaction to it. So it's less like well, you would have to know Castlevania to get that type of thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So yeah,
yeah. Um, so that's a good point. Like in terms of, I guess the follow up to that would be, you mentioned that there are some games that you don't write about that are some of your favorite because they just didn't connect to that powerful moment in your life.
yeah.
Um, I'm not asking though what's your favorite game of all time, but maybe what are a few examples of this? Like what are a
Oh,
few
sure,
games that
sure.
you would have loved to like incorporate, but you couldn't like put those two things together.
Like one of my favorite games of all time is Planescape Torment.
Mm,
And it's
mm,
just, it's just always been when I first played it, I hadn't experienced a computer game that had that type of like depth of choice and story where I really felt like, that was maybe the first game where I really, really felt and saw how my choices could change the way the story went. And I know there were
mm.
games before it that were doing it, but that just happened to be the first one I got. And I think, but the thing was like I had a perfectly good time with it. I think I got it for a birthday. I think I like took the weekend off and beat it in a weekend.
Sure.
There was nothing that really occurred around it in my life. Like it was a beautiful
You didn't
experience.
make a costume. You didn't,
Right, exactly.
it didn't become your whole identity,
Yeah,
you know.
exactly. So, and so something like that's a little harder to write about, or the reverse, like memories from my childhood that I'm like, oh, this is such an awesome memory that I had no game to connect it to. Like I
Mm,
have like a
mhm.
very fond memory of my mom basically cursing out another mom at another kid's birthday party because that kid had been mean to me.
Oh,
And so,
great.
and it's like a really fond story, and my mom and I still talk about it, but it's not connected to any video game at all. So I
Mhm.
didn't want to just shoehorn it in because it's a fun story to tell.
Yeah, yeah. It's about finding those overlaps and the Venn diagrams between those impactful moments in your life and the
E-
games that are connected to them.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Um, I guess you talk about games as a sort of a form of escapism. Do you It's funny because I feel like as we get more and more into this digital age, we're finding the inverse, right? Like touching grass is actually something that people like want to
Yeah.
go, like are challenged to go and do, right?
Yeah.
Um, like I guess what are some of your thoughts about like how this kind of evolution of the digital age has made it so that maybe video games aren't quite the I don't know quite the escape that they used to be, or do you feel that way?
Um, I feel like there's still the escape portion. I just think it's widened far more out to things like, I mean, Fortnite's existed forever now, but things like Fortnite where like people go to hang out and go to concerts, where,
Mhm, mhm,
it's not just, you know, figuratively, oh, all my friends are hanging out in there, where like literally people are just going there and talking and leaving, or with Roblox. So that has changed. And I think that that's outside of certain problems with Roblox in terms of abuse of people. I think that's good. It's good to be able to have that socializing as an outlet for it. That said, there's still a lot of games like, Alan Wake 2 is like a game that I can escape into.
mhm,
There's still
mhm,
like a lot of more modern games that, whether they're solo games or multiplayer games that don't involve a lot of socialization, you could say,
mhm,
um, I still feel like I can get lost in it. And it's not necessarily even um, escapism like it has to just blur out the rest of the world. Sometimes it's escapism like, you know, oh, playing, Magical Drop 7, just playing a simple puzzle game and just like letting my mind get into a meditative state. Like sometimes that
mhm,
too.
mhm. Yeah, kind of using it to disconnect, to reset, like and just kind of provide a bit of a separation between whatever it was that you were doing before that had you stressed out, sad, whatever, to
Yeah.
being able to transform and escape in that way. That's great.
Yeah.
Um, I guess I'm curious, you mentioned that you had drafted after they kind of picked up the pitch and they were like, "Oh, like we really like this book, go for it." And then you drafted
Yeah.
like 70 pages of it and you just like knocked out like, 25% of the book or something in that
Yeah.
first kind of big pitch. As you sort of work through the process, maybe outside of finding that those Venn diagram overlaps of like the milestones in your life and the games to connect them to, like were there other particularly challenging elements of putting the book together, or a certain milestone where you're like kind of like dragging through the mud to like get through a certain section of it, or did it all kind of flow pretty freely after that?
It definitely didn't flow freely. I kind of, in the
Mm,
pitch, I had a basic table of contents, and
mm,
I'd say 75% of it stayed the same, and then 25% of it got swapped out with something else, just
mm.
because sometimes you have like a 2 sentence idea that can't translate to a 25-page idea.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
so it definitely, it wasn't a difficult process in the sense of this was the most painful thing for me to ever write. A lot of it was cathartic, in fact, even the painful stuff. It was
Hmm.
more like um, it was more like a lot of work. It was more just like tedious. Like writing is a tedious process, so it was really just about like really just like being like keep going. I had to like I would check my word counts and be like, all right, you got 2,000 today. We can stop. And then some
Yeah.
days I'd just be flying and write fucking 5,000 words.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so I think, and there were some difficulties. There was like topics I wanted to write about or not. How much of my relationship with my dad in terms of like some of the violent stuff I hint at did I really want to get into? Did I want to like
Hmm.
go hard, or did I want it to be more of a rounded portrait of things?
Hmm.
Um, you know, uh, I kind of made an early choice to not include really any sex just because I couldn't think of anything that fit story wise. But I was like, I'd maybe want it to be, even though there's a lot of swearing in it, hopefully something a kid finds and thinks funny.
Hmm.
Like a kid like me, not like a 6-year-old, but like some dork who's like, oh, this is a funny book about games.
Yeah, yeah.
And a lot of those things were things I realized I wanted as I was writing it.
Hmm.
But yeah, it was tough. It was also tough, like, because you're writing sometimes about people who are, either dead or you haven't talked to in forever, or, might get upset at you for it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
at one point, I even, because my dad is in this a lot, as you know, I sent
yeah,
him a near final draft, and I was like, I'm not looking for notes, but I just wanted you to see this so you don't feel blindsided by it. And then he came back with notes, and
of course, yeah,
he, he was like, I want these. He's like, can you change these 5 things? And I was like, I'll give you 2 of these, just because 2 of them I was like, that is actually a fair request. Like,
yeah,
like one of them was a joke that made him sound worse at his job than he was, and I forget what the other one was, but both of them I was like, that's actually absolutely fair.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but that's still difficult itself. It's even if you have a weird relationship with your dad, it's weird to be like, hey, here's that book that's going to be out in the world that says some of the terrible things you did. So let me know.
yeah. I'm airing out the laundry. I just wanted to warn you in advance in case you look out the
Right,
window and you see it flying on the flagpole.
right. Well, it's like I wanted him to like. It was like I didn't want him to feel attacked by it. I didn't want it to come
Sure,
out and then
sure.
him read it and be like, "Oh, this is what you're doing." I wanted him more to be able to be like, "Okay, I know what you're doing with this. I'm past feeling weird about it."
Yeah,
But it's kind of a nerve wracking process. You're also being very vulnerable. You're writing about vulnerable parts of your life, and there's the chance that, like, I'm very very glad you enjoyed it, but there's the chance that, like, if I get overwhelming negative reactions, it's almost like this fear of like, was my life terrible?
oh yeah,
Like, did I live a
yeah.
bad life?
It's like when you're like telling family stories and it gets really uncomfortable because you realize like you had a deeply traumatic experience or
Right,
a very not
exactly,
normal experience. People are like, we didn't all get beaten like
right.
regularly. That's a you thing. That's not a us thing.
What does reaching for his belt mean? Is that, no, no, no? It's not what you think.
No, no,
It's a
no.
beating thing. Don't worry. It's not a
Don't worry
sex
about
thing.
that.
Yeah,
um,
and like, yeah. So there was like a lot of outside of just the tedium of having to write 90,000 words. It's really just like sort of all the emotional considerations, and really 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 trying to write about things like middle school and high school without hurting some of the people that are mentioned in it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we all suck during those years, right?
Yeah,
So I mean, like,
yeah,
we have to kind of reflect and be at peace with that, and honestly be thankful that social media wasn't really a thing when at least you and I were in middle and
yeah.
high school. Thank God.
Oh, thank
Um,
God. Yeah.
my memories are enough to make me want to cringe into oblivion. Um,
Exactly.
so I'm curious. You obviously you started out as a kind of doing stand-up comedy. You talk about a bit in your book in college, right? and
Yeah.
and sort of your comedic instinct and influence like led into these various other writing gigs that you have and internships and working at SNL and all these other great things. I'm curious if, well, let me rewind for a second. First of all, in the table of contents that you did in your pitch, did you have those random little, like, you do these little essays of like what your favorite arcade game says about
Yeah.
you, like
Yeah. Yeah.
were
The
those in there in
interstitials.
that
Yeah.
original thing or were they added afterwards?
They were. Yes, they were in the table of contents because in the pitch we actually had a section that mentioned like some lighthearted interstitial sections to like
Okay,
give
gotcha.
breathing room to the essays. So those actually
Okay,
were in the table of contents. Yeah.
okay. I wasn't sure because I mean I love those as well. Wasn't sure if like initially it was like more like true to form, like a kind of biography with these like stories tied to the video games, or if they always were in there to begin with. So that's good to know. And then going back to my other question was, how in writing this book, like, or do you feel that in writing this book, your writing style or skill, I guess, was kind of stretched or grew in a different way versus the way that you traditionally have been doing your writing,
Yeah.
neither journalism or for scripts and that sort of thing.
Well, I mean, one thing that it writing a book, especially a book about yourself, that
Hmm.
you learn a lot about is how many times you use the exact same phrase over and over and over and over again.
Mm.
You know, we all have, small favorite idioms we use, but when you do like a find and replace and you're like, oh my god, I used that phrase 18 times throughout this book.
Yeah, or chapter, right? Like you
Yeah,
finish a
no,
chapter,
even even
you're in
yeah.
this like free flow, and you finish like 20 pages, and you're like, "Phew!" And like, okay, I'm gonna go do a parse, and then you're like, "Oh my god."
It's but like, so you really you almost have to expand the way you're just used to talking, especially if you're just used to writing short pieces or, regular essays, or even if, maybe you're a journalist writing like a 1500, 2000 word journalism piece. You really have to be like, oh, I need to watch out for how I'm speaking, not even just for the content, but also like so I don't sound like an idiot. So I don't sound like I only know a couple phrases, like I'm an AI or something.
Hmm, hmm.
And so that definitely helped grow my writing, because it definitely made me expand, my phrases, my usage, my trying to make sure I'm doing that, like listening to myself. Also, I recorded the audiobook myself, not myself, like they paid me and I went to a studio.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
but that actually taught me a lot of things I wish I had done while writing the book. Like, I should have been reading it aloud a lot more. I should have been hearing how
Mm,
it sounds, if it sounds
hmm.
natural. It wasn't many big problems, and I was doing that sort of naturally as a stand up anyway. But that's like, oh, I should have done that for everything. That would have really
Yeah.
helped, like, catch a couple small, weird phrasings. So yeah, it just was a good lesson in long form writing. It was a lot of things that, even things like a sitcom script is only like 30 pages. This is
Right.
the longest thing I've ever written, and it really taught me to watch out for not just saying like, meanwhile 30 times in each essay.
When you're out of, if you've ever been in academia, right? But when you're in academia, you start to realize that as well, because you still have people presumably looking at your work and giving you those notes. But if you're writing for for fun, or even just occasionally, or in those smaller spurts, to your point, you won't necessarily catch those like broader trends. So that
Yeah.
um, must have been a bit of a wake up call. Um, I'm curious also. When it comes to gaming, I think there's still, it's interesting because like gaming is very much mainstream, right?
Hmm.
Like it's
Yeah.
become much more mainstream, recognizable, but not like, I don't even know like if we say like acceptable, right? Social, like the line still is kind of like gray in terms of like socially or professionally acceptable at a certain point. There's sort of like a, I don't know what the chart would look like quite yet, but there's like
Yeah.
a range of ages where it's like it's okay, not okay, okay, not okay, and there's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
different ranges. Um, I guess in your and you share some of these anecdotes in your story as well. Talking about like Wii Sports and and your dominance, and how you were hoping that would like earn you the respect and
Yeah. Of
admiration of your
course.
peers. But I guess in some of your other experiences in the professional world, like is being a gamer normal? Like are you like, did you experience that in some of the other writer rooms that you were in, and some of the other experiences that you're in, or do you feel like did this continue to be something that you are able to connect with people on a professional level about, or is it sort of like, hey, we do our work here, and then we step out and maybe we vibe about our hobbies outside of work, you know what I mean? Like,
Um, Yeah, no, I mean, like, usually on shows, I usually run into a couple people who are super into games. I mean, like, I am probably intensely too into games. So, at times, I'm sure I'm kind of annoying about things.
mhm,
Uh, but yeah, no, like, plenty of jobs. People, like, where I worked on Adam Ruins Everything, Adam Conover is a massive gamer. When I worked on President Show, Anthony Atamanuik is a massive gamer. So, like, it was definitely in the culture. That said, um, I think the bigger divide is that if you're not into games, you have often not heard of anything outside of maybe Grand Theft Auto and Mario and Tetris or Fortnite. Like,
mhm,
and so like,
mhm,
whereas if you're not really into TV, you've probably through osmosis heard enough about what The Bachelor is about or Love is Blind is about.
mhm.
But if, you went up to someone who doesn't play video games and you're like, have you heard of Death Stranding? They'd be
Yeah.
like, I have no idea what that is.
Couldn't
Or, you
even
know what I mean?
begin to contextualize. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, Interesting. So the book comes out April 1st.
Hmm.
And you can go and pre-order it now. Highly recommend anybody who's listening to this to go and do so. Again, it's fantastic work. I did I was really honestly taken. I don't know if I was taken by surprise, but the near and far chapter,
Yeah.
um, just before we kind of like move into one other thing that I wanted to talk about, but like that was very, very powerful. And so I just wanted to give you kudos there. Very
Thank
poignantly
you very
written.
much.
And I think, really does, resonate with, a lot of folks who have made so many connections and friendships, like kind of virtually, and the work that goes into sort of like managing those ties when, it's you were earlier you were mentioning how, when you're referring to people in the book and like how they might accept things or coming to terms with like different people in your life and different experiences that you had. Like maybe you're writing a section, you're like, I haven't talked to that guy in 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
We probably should sort this out, or
Yeah.
whatever the case might be. And so I guess just kind of related to, what we find in the near and far section, um maybe one or two additional insights that you've had in terms of how gaming has maybe helped you to, whether it's more on the escapism side or maybe even some broader lessons that you might have learned from like a specific game, that
Yeah.
you were able to like kind of take a step back from your life and you know improve.
Totally. I mean, I think, for me, it's often a common language with people. The same as if I'm very into a specific TV show or very into a specific movie. The thing is, I'm just very into video games in general.
Right.
And so when someone else is like that, when someone else has, and I don't mean like someone else has like some high functioning knowledge or whatever. I just mean someone who like is excited to talk about it. It's super exciting to me, especially when it's someone who's kind of like positive about it. I think, I get bummed out because it feels like every conversation about games that I see is negative, and sometimes for good reason and sometimes for terrible reason. But like, it's nice when you meet someone where you could just be like, oh, when that moment happened, I made me feel this and I was so excited by this, you know. And so I really wanted to celebrate that in that chapter, like that sort of friendship that develops over, just games. And people have the same friendship in, again, sports and music, but I don't have that part of me. And so to have that in games is great. And it's not just like a friend, you know that we happen to do raids together. It's like someone that I actually grew close to
Right.
and cared about.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then you don't see them around, and I mean, there's memes about it too, but it's bittersweet. Like last online
Yeah.
5 years ago or 10
Yeah.
years ago, when you see those like Xbox profiles, and it's like, they could be gone, which obviously would be very tragic, or it could just be, they just gone in another sense, right? Like they got
Yeah.
married, they got a job, they maybe they fell more into a different hobbies, and now that
Exactly.
that chapter in their life is gone, and or past, right? And then it sort of leaves you wondering, maybe as a gamer, you're like, am I in the wrong space?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
should I have graduated past this chapter, after college? and
Exactly.
and now I'm almost 40 years old and looking forward to, you know, Death Stranding 2, or, like Assassin's Creed Shadows, or whatever the case
Yeah.
might be. Like, am I Peter Pan? Am I the stifled one here? So um yeah, I think that's all very, very valid. Um, Awesome. Well, thank you again for taking some time to chat a bit about the book. I don't have a ton in terms of like news and stuff to chat about. Usually, we'll dive into some higher level topics and headlines and such. But really, I guess the only thing I wanted to kind of pick your brain about, that happened yesterday. Was
Hmm.
it yesterday or 2 days ago? Was the Death Stranding 2 trailer that came out?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Man, that thing is freaking wild. So, if y'all aren't familiar, by the way, Mike, happy Mario Day.
Oh, thank you very much. Happy Mario
Happy
Day to you
Mario
as
Day to
well.
you.
To
Yeah,
all who celebrate.
to all who celebrate. Some agnostic out there is like,
Ah.
no, but yeah, no, that the trailer for Death Stranding 2, Hideo Kojima dropped like a 10-minute trailer
Yeah.
featuring all
It's
kinds of
10 minutes long.
10 minutes, but it doesn't
It's
feel
great.
like 10
No,
minutes.
no, it moves. It moves
It
fast.
moves. it moves really fast. So we got the baby in the fallopian tube shot. We got the all kinds of craziness going on with Hartman and Norman Reedus and all kinds of amazing looking character models and CGI.
So
Um,
crazy.
are you so? I forget you might have mentioned it in the book, but like, did you play Death Stranding? Are you a fan of the franchise in general, or did you kind of like dip your toes and you're like, oh, this is kind of cool, and then kind of walked away from
I played Death Stranding. I didn't finish it. I ended up just sort of like reading and watching the end of the story online, and I should
it?
probably go back to it because
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I put a good amount of time into it. It just became one of those things where I kind of started playing another game and then forgot where I was and had to go back and recap everything and was just like, I'll just watch through the end.
yeah, yeah,
But yeah, I was a fan of it. You know what? Like, I appreciate that it was a massive giant swing. There's a lot about it I don't like.
sure,
There's probably a reason that I was like, I've earned my money back with the game. I'm gonna just see how it ends. But the fact that it tried something so weird and so different and so big and just like the most bonker nonsense story, you like it's neither good nor bad. It just is.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
uh, but like you know, I'm excited for Death Stranding 2 for that reason. I'm excited for these big giant swings that Kojima makes. Like sometimes they don't work, but you're like, man, this is a dude who at least is giving it his all.
yeah. I mean, he really is an auteur, right? In
Yeah,
every sense of the word, in that he is fully committed to his creative vision, and
yeah,
like you cannot say anything else but that. Like, he knows what he wants to do, and he's earned, when you make Metal Gear Solid, when you make Son
yeah,
of the Enders, when you make these, amazing games, you kind of earn the right to, pick up the studio and
yeah,
create these big beautiful things. And I agree. I think it's a catch 22, because, right, like, Kojima's earned the right to take these swings, right, because he has these established properties.
yeah.
But we also see in the modern industry, especially with like AAA games, like, nobody wants to take swings.
Right.
nobody
Yeah,
nobody else wants to take chances right now, because they can barely ship AAA IPs and make their money back on it, right? And so, like, putting in the money to make these things, that's why I think it's so refreshing, right?
yeah. I
To
agree.
see somebody who's enabled to create something like this. So,
And
um
make it an event, like literally, an event game in the sense of like, oh, we all need to get Death Stranding 2 on this day. That's
yeah,
it's fun when we have those.
yeah, yeah. When you put in the sick time, right? Like I did it for Elden Ring, right? I did it for Shadow of the Erd Tree. Some other games, like, feel like you're back in school and
Yeah,
mom
Tears
lets you
of the
stay home
Kingdom.
sick.
Yeah.
Yeah, all that stuff. And it's like, okay, I'm gonna, I did it for Rebirth, that sort of thing. I don't think my boss is listening to this, so I was sick that day. But anyway, like those kinds of games where it's like, yeah, I'm gonna put in some time and I'm gonna enjoy it. And yeah, Death Stranding 2 definitely feels like that sort of game where you make it an event. Like, you clear your calendar, you get Domino's for lunch.
Yeah,
You just stay in. You revert to the
exactly.
you revert to the goblin that you once were and always will be.
Exactly.
Um, awesome. Well, Mike, I want to thank you again so much, for taking some time to chat, and
Of
for your
course.
book.
Thank you.
I really did enjoy it, even if all the haters disagree. Yeah, which I don't think is true. I think if you're on social media, you're seeing lots of really great comments on this book, and if you read this book and you have experience in gaming, whether you're born in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, you'll find something, in here that relates to your experience as a gamer. And so, well done.
Thank you
Looking
very
forward
much.
to
I
the
really
final
appreciate
release.
that.
Yeah, yeah, of course. All right. Well, thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. Until next time, may your save points never be too far away. See you next time.
Bye.